Pete Duval had worked the auction floor at Harwick Premier for 11 years, and he believed he could size a man up before the man crossed the threshold. It was a skill the work rewarded. You learned to read the cut of a jacket, the confidence of a stride, the way a person held themselves against the marble and the glass. Pete was not unkind. He simply knew what the room required. So when the battered pickup rolled into the forecourt on a Tuesday morning, primer gray, one crumpled rear panel, a web of rust along the rocker seams, Pete noticed, the staff noticed. Grayson Holt, the floor manager, stopped mid-sentence with a clipboard in his hand and turned the way a man turns when something has walked into the wrong address. The driver climbed out. He was somewhere past 40, lean, with the kind of quiet in his face that came from years of deliberate work rather than ease. He wore a collared shirt, well kept but not new. He lifted a leather satchel from the passenger seat, and then reached back and offered his hand to the girl inside. 9 years old, dark-haired, gap-toothed, in a good dress she'd clearly chosen herself. She took his hand and jumped down to the forecourt and looked up at the building with the frank interest of a child who had been told something important was happening here. Grayson Holt moved. He crossed the forecourt before the man had taken 3 steps toward the entrance. And when he spoke, it was in the careful, carrying voice he used when a lesson needed witnesses. "Drivers use the loading bay," Holt said. "Around the back." The man looked at him without alarm. "I'm not a driver. I'm Ray Callis. I'm the senior appraiser for the Varennes consignment." A pause. Somewhere behind Pete, someone made a small sound. Holt looked at the truck. He looked at the man. He looked at the child, who was watching Holt with steady, patient eyes. Then his expression settled into something that Pete would later spend a long time trying to describe, not malice exactly, but certainty, the kind that turns a person into a statement. "Mr. Callis," Holt said, "this is a premier house. The clients arriving today have certain expectations. Showing up in that," he gestured at the truck, "through the front entrance, with a child, sends a message we can't absorb. I'm going to have to let you go." Ray Callis said nothing for a moment. He set a hand on Clara's shoulder, briefly, as if to keep her steady. Then he nodded once, the way a man nods when he has decided to let a thing be what it is. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He turned, guided Clara back to the truck, and opened the door for her. Pete watched him drive slowly out of the forecourt. He watched Clara turn in the passenger seat and look back at the building through the rear window as they went. Half the floor was smiling. Pete smiled too. It was the kind of thing the room needed to correct itself. He told himself that for 4 days. On the 5th day, Pete was cross-referencing the provenance files on the Varennes, a 1937 pre-war racing car, beautiful and contested, the centerpiece of Harwick Premier's autumn preview. And he found the name the way you find something that has been in front of you all along. The methodology section of every provenance dossier in the house used the same framework, the same systematic approach to chain of custody documentation, the same hierarchy of physical evidence, the same notation for disputed periods. Pete had used it for years without ever asking who wrote it. The masthead of the original technical guide read, "R. Callis, lead authentication specialist." The date was 9 years ago. He put the folder down. He picked it up again. He sat with it. On the 6th day, the attorney's call came. It came at 11 in the morning, during the preview, when the main floor was full of collectors, and the consigning family's representatives were standing near the Varennes, watching their watches. Director Elaine Marsh took the call in her office and came out 2 minutes later with the expression of someone who has discovered a structural problem mid-ceremony. The call was from the estate attorney. The terms of the consignment were clear. The physical authentication had to carry a legally recognized signature before the gavel fell. The provenance chain had one such signature already recorded against the car. A partial examination conducted 3 years prior, left unfinished when the consignment stalled and revived. That signature was Ray Callis. No other appraiser in the region held the same recognized standing with the estate's underwriter. The auction could not proceed to sale without him. Pete watched the director cross the floor. He watched her push through the main doors. He followed. He couldn't say exactly why. The battered truck was already in the forecourt. It had been there for perhaps a minute. Ray Callis had not come inside. He was leaning against the passenger door, arms folded, looking at the building with no particular expression. Clara was sitting on the tailgate in her jacket, reading a library book, her feet swinging. Director Marsh walked to him. She was a composed woman, rarely uncertain, and Pete had never seen her walk towards someone with the particular deliberateness she showed now. Not dominance, but necessity. The clients behind the glass were watching. The staff in the doorway were watching. "Mr. Callis," she said, "we need you inside." Ray looked at her for a moment. There was nothing in his face that resembled satisfaction. "The authentication," he said. "Yes." He was quiet. Clara had looked up from her book. She was watching her father and the director, the way children watch when they understand that the thing happening is important. "I'll need my equipment," Ray said. "It's in the truck." "Of course." He went to the bed of the truck and lifted a worn steel case, the kind with foam-cut interior and careful latches, and carried it toward the door. He paused at the tailgate. "Clara," he said it simply, and she closed her book and slid down and fell in beside him. And the three of them went through the front entrance together. Pete stepped back to let them pass. He did not smile. He found he did not want to. Ray Callis worked the way Pete would remember for years afterward. He set the case on the examination table and opened it with the quiet efficiency of a man who had never needed to perform anything. The instruments, in their places, the magnification equipment assembled without rush, the documentation laid in order. He bent over the Varennes-Chalot's engine compartment, and the collectors and the estate representatives drew close, and then drew closer, because what he was doing had the quality of complete authority, the authority that has no need to announce itself. Clara sat in a chair against the wall, with her book open in her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was watching her father work. Her chin was up. It took 40 minutes. When he straightened, he set both hands on the table and looked at Director Marsh and said evenly that the car was authentic, that the provenance chain was intact, and that he would sign the required documentation. The estate attorney, present by speakerphone, asked 2 questions. Ray answered them without hesitation. The line was quiet a moment, and then the attorney confirmed acceptance. The room was still. Elaine Marsh held the documentation for a moment before she spoke. "The appraisal methodology, the one we use in every dossier," she said. "You wrote that." "I did," Ray said. She nodded slowly. She looked at the car and then back at him. "I owe you an apology." "You do," he said. He said it without heat, without elaboration, and the simplicity of it was harder than any anger would have been. She looked at Clara then, who was watching steadily. The director held her gaze for a moment, in the way adults hold the gaze of a child who has seen too much, and to Pete it seemed as if something passed between them. An acknowledgement, a beginning of something the afternoon did not yet have a name for. "I'd like to discuss a permanent arrangement," the director said, "if you're willing." Ray Callis latched his case and lifted it. "Send me the terms," he said. "I'll read them with Clara." He walked out through the front entrance, his daughter beside him, into the cool autumn light of the forecourt. He put the case in the truck bed. He opened the passenger door, and Clara climbed in. He stood for a moment with his hand on the doorframe, looking at nothing in particular, and then he got in, and the battered truck pulled slowly out of the forecourt. Pete Duval went back to his desk. He sat down. He looked at the Varennes-Chalot provenance file for a long moment, and then he put it away. He had been sizing men up for 11 years. He thought about that for a long time.